Thank you all for being here. Let me just introduce somebody who I think doesn't really need much of an introduction. Bob Reich is well known throughout our country as being one of the best known and I think most effective economists in this country. Bob served for 4 years as the Secretary of Labor in the first part of the Clinton administration. And I remember his work very well. I was in the Congress, and in my lifetime, I have not seen a better Secretary of Labor, somebody who made it very clear whose side he was on that job. He stood up for working people. He did all that he could to protect the needs of workers. So it is an honor for me in this campaign not only have the support of Bob, but to have him here today to talk about some of the very important economic issues facing our country. Bob.
Well, thank you, Senator. I'm going to be very brief and then turn it back over to the Senator, and we will answer your questions. Presumably you have most of them, hopefully, for the Senator. We are now in the Institute for Research in Labor and Employment here at Berkeley. I want to just say something that's very obvious to all of you, but it's pro forma, but it needs to be said officially. This is not an endorsement by the Institute or by Berkeley, University of California. We are a public institution of any presidential candidate. I have, however, endorsed Senator Sanders because I am convinced that his vision for where this country needs to go and the policies that he has enunciated are necessary to deal with the widening gap between typical workers and those at the top, to reduce poverty, and to create an economy that is working for all of us instead of an economy that's working for a few at the top. Now, today, the United States Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, announced that in May, only 38,000 new jobs were created. Now, I remember when I was Secretary of Labor and I would preside over those kinds of announcements, and it was also always very necessary to warn people and warn the press that you cannot see a trend out of 1 month's labor report. However, the Labor Department, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also at the same time revised the last 2 months before May, March and April, and those revisions were downward. And so that the last 3 months, we've seen a market slowing in the creation of new jobs. The reason unemployment and the official unemployment rate is down is because so many people have left the labor market altogether. And if you are not in the labor market looking for a job, you're not even counted as unemployed. Now, I say that not to cast a kind of a cloud over either the economy or in any way to criticize the present administration, but just to give you some context for the kind of discussion we are going to have and why Senator Sanders' proposals are so important. We tend to be mesmerized in this country by the business cycle. When things are going well, when the expansion is taking off and jobs are growing, we get very, very pleased, as we should be. And then, as all cycles do, we get to a point where things slow. And if we're unlucky, they slow so much we enter into a recession. But behind that business cycle is a much bigger story and a more important story. And it has to do with structural changes in the economy that have occurred and have affected wages and jobs in very profound ways over the last 40 years. Between the Second World War and the late 1970s, the typical wage in this country tracked the growth of the economy. They rose in tandem. And we were on the path toward a more equal economy because even people in the bottom fifth of the wage ladder did very well. They saw their incomes grow during those 30 years faster than the incomes of people at the top. And so we congratulated ourselves in the late 60s and 1970s that we were doing extraordinarily well, and we were on the path toward an economy that was really working for everybody. We still weren't there. Women in the workforce were second-class citizens. We had a long way to go. African Americans also were second-class citizens in the workforce and in terms of voting rights. We had a long way to go, but at least we had the optimism and we had the political will to make the changes that were necessary. But since the late 70s, early 1980s, we've made a U-turn. And instead of everyone growing together, we've grown apart. Wages have stagnated. They've gone up a little bit, median wages. Today, the typical family, half of American families are actually worse off, adjusted for inflation, than they were in the year 2000. This so-called recovery has been very modest as recoveries go. And if it is slowing down, it's slowing down partly because Congress has not seen fit to implement the kind of policies that Senator Sanders has called for, such as major infrastructure spending and an end to austerity economics. But it's also because trickle-down economics, something that Senator Sanders also rightfully opposes, doesn't work. We've seen the wealthier get wealthier as their taxes have been cut over the past 30 years, and almost nothing has trickled down to the middle class. The middle class has been shrinking, and the ranks of the poor have grown. We now have a whole new class of people called the working poor. That should be an oxymoron, working poor. But many people now are working, and yet they are still struggling. And Senator Sanders' proposal to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour is critically important. It's important to those families, to those individuals. It's also important in terms of putting money in the pockets of people who will spend the money, and that spending has a multiplier effect. That spending will improve the economy overall. Now, I don't want to take away any thunder from the person you came to hear, but I just want to say that I could go through all of the policies that he has promoted, including Medicare for All, critically important, a single-payer program in terms of what average Americans have to cope with today, healthcare costs still going up. It is inevitable. We must do this. And the reason that I am supporting Senator Sanders is because he has had the courage to put squarely in front of the public issues that we as a nation must embrace. Finally, let me just say one thing. When you talk about widening inequality, typically economists, policy analysts will point to two things. One, globalization, and the second, technological advances that have displaced workers. But there is a third factor that Senator Sanders has also focused on, and that is the increasing political power of people who have a lot of wealth, big corporations, and Wall Street. Power to bend the rules, laws, and regulations to their advantage and to the disadvantage of many other Americans. If we don't see what's happening in terms of the vicious cycle of wealth and power in this country and how it's contributing to widening inequality, we are ignoring one of the biggest factors that is responsible for the stagnation of wages and the unfairness that so many people are experiencing. So with that having said, with saying that, laying that groundwork, it gives me a great thrill, and I'm very privileged to present to you Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much, Bob. There is a lot of anger in the United States today. We're seeing it every day. And the reason that people are angry and frustrated and scared is that by the millions, They are working longer hours for low wages. In my state of Vermont, and it is true in almost every part of the country, people are working 2 or 3 jobs. People are scared to death about what is going to happen to their children, who in increasing numbers are living at home because they can't afford a home or an apartment of their own. Young people who are leaving school, either dropping out of college or graduating college, incredibly in debt. And people are looking around and they're asking, what is going on in America? What's going on? And what they are understanding is there has not been some natural disaster that has impacted our country. But what in fact has gone on is there has been a massive shift of wealth from the middle class and working families, not even to the top 1%, but to the top 1/10 of 1%, who have seen a doubling of the percentage of wealth they own in the last 25 years. So this is not a circumstance, gee, it's too bad, everybody is hurting. What is going on is the middle class is suffering. The working class is suffering even more. We got 47 million people living in poverty, one of the highest numbers in the history of our country, and yet the people on top are doing phenomenally well, and many of the largest corporations are making record-breaking profits. Over the last 20 to 30 years, there has been a massive shift in wealth. Now, I know my Republican colleagues are very nervous about redistribution of wealth, but there has been a redistribution of wealth. Problem is, it's gone in the wrong direction. It's gone from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. And that is where we are today. We are in a nation where people are angry and they are frustrated. They are unhappy about the current state of the economy, and they are fearful about the future. And then tied into that, as Secretary Reich said, is that we have a political system now where the billionaires on top are trying to cement their unfair advantages in the economy through a broken campaign finance system which allows them to buy and sell politicians through super PACs and other mechanisms. So what do we have to do? Now, I know every day I get attacked by somebody or other, whether it's the Washington Post or the New York Times or whatever it is, that you're too bold, your ideas are too radical, how are you going to pay for these ideas? Well, when trillions of dollars have gone from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%, I see nothing wrong with an agenda that says maybe that money should come back in a variety of ways to the middle class and to the working families of this country, which is exactly what my political agenda is about. As Secretary Reich just mentioned, when you raise the minimum wage above the 7.25 federal minimum wage today, which is a starvation wage, I will never forget, I'm not going to give you a long speech. I was in Detroit, Michigan, maybe a year and a half ago, and I talked to young people, mostly African-American young people, or not so young, some of them were parents, who were working in McDonald's. Never forget this. They were getting 7.25 an hour. They couldn't even get 40 hours a week. They got 20 hours a week. That's another whole issue. And they would go by bus from one job to another job to another job in order to try to stay alive on 7.25 an hour. You can't stay alive on 7.25. And when you raise the minimum wage, as I propose, to $15 an hour, you're going to take millions of people out of poverty. You're going to put money into the hands of working people. That money, as the Secretary just said, is going to be recycled. Because they're going to go shopping, they're going to buy a product, that store will need more workers, they'll get more money, and on it goes. So we've got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, which is $15 an hour. We have, as again the Secretary just indicated, real unemployment is almost double, or maybe is double. Would you say about what official unemployment is? Probably over 9.5%. We can put 13 million people back to work in this country, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, all over this country, in California. People are struggling with water. 13 million jobs rebuilding our infrastructure. We're going to have to rebuild our infrastructure at one point or another, hopefully. Let's do it now. Let's put our people back to work. We, as Secretary Reich indicated, we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. This is not a radical idea. Maybe a radical idea to the drug companies or the insurance companies, but guaranteeing health care to all people as a right and saving middle-class families money as part of that process, nothing radical about it. The United States should join the rest of the industrialized world. Right here at the University of California at Berkeley, yeah. I believe that in the year 2016, public colleges and universities should be tuition-free and we should lower student debt. Are these radical ideas? These are not radical ideas. Nobody thinks they're radical ideas. The opposition to all of these ideas are not that they're radical ideas, not that they're unworkable ideas. The opposition comes from the fact that, yes, we are stepping on the toes of Wall Street and corporate America and the wealthiest people in this country who, in fact, under my proposal, will have to pay their fair share of taxes. That's all that this is about. We pay for every proposal that we have brought forth, including rebuilding our infrastructure in terms of including making public colleges and universities tuition-free, including expanding and extending Social Security. And I'm delighted that just the other day President Obama voiced his view that that is what we should be doing. Nothing radical about what we're talking about, but what we are talking about is the need, finally, to tell the billionaire class, corporate America and their media and other people that they cannot have it all. That we are going to transform America. We are going to address the real issues facing working families. So I want to thank Bob Reich not only for the great work that he does here at the University of California, not only for the many, many books that he has written, but for his outstanding tenure as one of the great secretaries of labor in American history. Thank you all very much. Yes.
So according to the May jobs report, employers added just 38,000 jobs in May, which is the lowest number since September 2010. Republicans are blaming Obama's policies, but I wanted to get your take on what that report means for workers and why the report was so bad. Right.
Well, Republicans blame Obama if it's too hot, if it's too cold, but maybe the Republicans might want to go back to the last months of the Bush administration when we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, all right? When we were running up the largest deficit in the history of this country, 1.4 trillion, and when the world's financial system, as a result of the illegal behavior and greed on Wall Street, was on the verge of collapse. Maybe some of my Republican colleagues might want to go back to 2000 and to when Bush was leaving office in 2008. But clearly, these reports, as the Secretary just indicated, this is not good. These are bad reports. These are bad labor reports. And what that tells me is that we need to put Americans back to work in a very significant way. And that tells me that we have to, among many other things, rebuild our infrastructure. $1 trillion investment over 5 years creates 13 million jobs. It also tells me that longer term, we have to rethink our trade policies because we have lost millions of decent paying jobs over the last 30 years as corporations shut down profitable manufacturing facilities in the United States to move to low-wage countries. So obviously this jobs report is bad news for American workers. More and more workers are giving up looking for work. Real unemployment is probably double the quote-unquote official 4.7%. So we have got to understand that there is a lot of unemployment in this country, a lot of underemployment, with people working part-time when they want to work full-time, and that we need a major jobs program. And one of the best ways to do that is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure.
How do you plan to
Yeah,
implement-
well, excuse
how do
me,
you
excuse
plan
me,
to
yes.
implement
Yeah,
that
right here, yeah.
in the
Yes,
process?
David.
How do you plan to implement-
David, what's your question?
Well, I was asking a question.
Well, I'm asking David a question, because David occasionally writes about the things,
I defer to her for now.
well, he occasionally writes about the things that we talk about.
I occasionally do too.
Well, not too often, but yes.
But how do you plan to implement this into the labor issues that you talked about, into the platform of the National Convention, and at the same
But
time?
that wasn't what, see, that's the point.
I'm
You've
talking
made this
about
into
the
a,
legal
well, excuse me,
issues that you
excuse
brought
me,
up.
excuse me. You've made this a political question. Right now, what I am talking about is how we rebuild the American economy. Now, you're asking me, as I understand it, how we get this into the Democratic platform.
And how would you push for that in the future?
Well, right now, what the point of this press conference is to say Democratic National Convention or no Democratic National Convention. What Congress needs to do is to stand up for working families and the middle class. And we have an agenda to do that. And we need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need to make significant reforms to our disastrous trade policies. We need to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Think about this. Paid family and medical leave. I used to say the United States was the only major country on earth. It's not only major countries. Poor countries all over the world understand that when women have babies, they have the right to stay home with those babies. We're one of the few countries. That's what we have to do. And what we have to do is join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right. I'm a United States Senator from Vermont, and I hope to be President of the United States. And I'm going to do every damn thing that I can to make sure that Congress starts representing the interest of working families rather than wealthy campaign contributors. Yes?
Senator, you just talked about this massive legislation to create jobs. Now, Donald Trump is a businessman and says he actually has created jobs, so why should Americans believe that you can do the job better?
Well, Donald Trump has also created 4 bankruptcies. Because I have a record as a United States Senator and a former congressman of standing up for working families. I don't think, to be honest with you, that among economists, even some conservative economists, that there is a lot of debate about what has to happen. The real challenge is that we have right now a Congress, especially a Republican-led Congress, which is much more interested in protecting the interests of their wealthy campaign contributors than the needs of the American people. I think that every idea that I have laid out here and I've laid out in this campaign has majority support, not only from Democrats, but from progressives, but from Republicans as well. This is a pretty commonsensical idea. The people who do not support it are the people who make huge campaign contributions, the people on Wall Street, the people who are the CEOs of large multinational corporations. And I'm sorry that they don't support it, but if I'm elected president, what they're going to learn is that our government is going to represent all of the people and not just wealthy and powerful special interests.
Senator, is there an action you would recommend the president take now that he doesn't need Congress to go through?
Well, I think, he has begun, and his work on overtime is something that we have worked with him on, and I think that's a great step forward. I think a lot of the initiatives that we need are going to need congressional action. And what I would urge the president to do in the remaining months of his tenure is to get out to the people and rally the American people around a progressive agenda. Raising the minimum wage is a no-brainer. Vast majority of the American people believe we should do that. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, paid family and medical leave. President just the other day spoke out on the need to expand and extend Social Security, a step in the right direction. I would like to see him do more of that. The way we bring change in this country is when millions of people stand up and demand that change. That is what this campaign is about.
Senator,
Yes, sir.
You've been in the Bay Area a lot this week. How would you describe just how the crowds are reacting to your message? And also, will you be in the Bay Area on June 7th?
Well, let me answer the first part. We are running, and somebody honestly can correct me here who knows more about California politics than I do. I think, and I've been told, that what we are doing is unprecedented. That means that in a several-week period, we will have held some 30 rallies in every part of this state, it now looks like, because the size of the turnouts has been larger than we had anticipated, my guess is that by the time we are finished with this campaign on Monday, we will have spoken to 250,000 Californians, 250,000 Californians. I don't know that, I may be wrong in this, but I'm not aware that any other candidate has spoken personally to that many people. And that's been the essence of our campaign. The response has been extraordinary. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here. None of these ideas are radical ideas. You know, these are common sense ideas. And the American people, and this is what the anger is about, they are sick and tired of seeing a Congress talk about tax breaks for billionaires, doing nothing about the high cost of prescription drugs. The agenda that we are laying out is a popular agenda. It's what the American people want, and I think it is reflected in the size of the turnouts that we're seeing. At this point, I think we will probably be in California on Tuesday night.
So in California, or so you?
Honestly, where are we going to be on San Francisco, right? Oh, LA. Okay, we'll be in LA, I think. Yeah.
Hi. So most academics and experts tend to agree on the issues of climate change, that it's happening, and agree that wealth inequality is increasing. But this election seems to show that a lot of the American people, at least, don't see that that's happening. Not necessarily majority.
Don't see what is happening.
Don't agree that necessarily climate change is happening. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a majority, but there are some Americans who.
Well, some do, yeah.
Right, and there's some contention over the facts. How would you, as president, shift the debate away from the facts and toward what we should do?
Well, I think that what has happened in recent years, and I would credit the Pope Francis, his encyclical on climate change is playing an important role. I'm on the Environmental Committee in the Senate. And the deniers, those people who say, oh, climate, like Donald Trump, those people who say that climate change is a hoax, their voices are becoming a bit more muted. Because it's just hard to deny the evidence that the people of California see every day with drought, with the numbers that come out that every year seems to be warmer than the previous year. That, people in my state, we have a lake that used to freeze over, Lake Champlain between New York and Vermont. It doesn't freeze anymore. People see this. So I would say that more and more people, and especially younger people, overwhelmingly believe that climate change is real, and they want to see real action. And one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is I think that this crisis is so severe that we do need to impose a tax on carbon. And I understand that Trump lives in his own world and works with the fossil fuel industry. But I think that fewer and fewer Americans hold that point of view. Sir?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about political revolution, because that's been a big part.
Can we stay on economics for a moment?
Sure.
Yeah, what was your question?
Well, another question, because I do work for the university, is a bit about tuition, because you've been talking about
Yeah.
making tuition free.
Yeah.
So what do you think the model is to make that as tuition continues to rise? One of the problems that we have here at this university, or a controversy that we've had, is bringing in out-of-state students or students from other places. How do you respond to the controversy?
Well, I think, and Secretary Reich teaches here, he knows more about it than I do. But all over the country, including the University of Vermont, schools are scrambling and they're figuring out ways to bring in revenue. I look at it from a different point of view, and that's what this campaign is about, is looking at things from a different approach. And I understand that the Chancellor has a problem. But the way I look at it is different. The way I look at it is to say that we are the richest country in the history of the world. We have seen a massive expanse in income and wealth inequality. We have seen a rapid rise in millionaires and billionaires. We have seen a situation where large multinational corporations in a given year pay not a nickel in federal taxes because they stash their money in the Cayman Islands. And what I believe, and again, this is an idea that the vast majority of the American people agree with. Nothing radical about it. We live in a competitive global economy. We will not succeed unless we have the best educated workforce in the world. So our job is to encourage not only young people, but workers to get the education that they need. And the way you do that is by having tuition-free public colleges and universities. And that is an idea that is supported by people all across the spectrum will understand how important education is to our country, and we pay for that. We pay for it through a tax on Wall Street speculation. That's what we do, you know. What the conventional wisdom is about is Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior destroyed the economy. Of course we're going to bail them out. Why would we not bail them out? But young people who desperately need a good education, of course they should leave school $50,000 or $70,000 in debt. Why would we help them? They're not wealthy campaign contributors. That's the kind of thinking we have got to break through. All right, the needs of young people in this country and the future of our economy is as important as Wall Street. Okay, maybe just a few more questions. From people who haven't been traveling with me. Anybody here from California? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Senator, you talked a lot about a lot of anger among the American people.
Yeah.
And that anger was palpable on the streets of San Jose last night. It was spirit. Some of those protesters that were engaging in violence identified themselves as Bernie Sanders supporters. Whether they are or not, who knows?
Right.
What are your thoughts on what happened?
Well, my thoughts are very clear. Violence is absolutely and totally unacceptable. And I do not want anybody, if people are thinking about violence, please do not tell anybody you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, because those are not the supporters that I want. I understand how reprehensible and disgraceful Donald Trump's positions are, how ignorant they are, how much he is appealing. And I can understand the anger. I surely can, because I feel it. The bigotry that is coming from his mouth, the insults to the Mexican community and the Latino community and the Muslim community and women and African Americans and veterans. I understand the anger, but we are not going to defeat Trump, you know, by throwing eggs or getting involved in violence of any kind. We defeat Trump when we stand together as one people and fight for a progressive agenda, educate, organize, bring out large numbers of people. And as I've said many times, in every national poll that I have seen, Bernie Sanders is not only ahead of Donald Trump, but in some cases ahead of him by a whole lot. I think here in California, I don't know what it is, 17 points or a lot more than that. So we will defeat Trump. But the way to defeat him is not by violence of any kind, not by personal harassment. It's by educating, by organizing, and bringing people out to vote. Okay. Yes, sir. No, this will be the last question. Yeah.
You know, it's been a difficult process to increase the $15 minimum wage in Berkeley alone. And I'm curious to know how you would apply that in areas like the Central Valley.
Well, you say it's been a difficult process, and in one sense, that's true. But let me give you another sense. If we were sitting here 5 years ago, and somebody said, you know what, I think we should raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that thought would have been incomprehensible, right? That's more than double the current federal minimum wage. So I think in recent years we have made real progress on that, primarily because of the courage of fast food workers who went out on the street, who went on strike, who demonstrated and told this country they can't make it on $7.25 an hour. So I think all I can tell you, and Secretary Reich made the point, that when we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, it will eliminate poverty for millions of people. It will give single mothers the ability to raise their kids in dignity, with dignity. It will also put money into the hands of working people who will then go out and spend it. So this is a very effective economic stimulus for the whole economy. And it will be easier, and I appreciate the communities that have fought to raise the minimum wage, and they have my support. But ultimately, it is a lot easier and more effective when we do it in 50 states in this country and in every city and town in this country. Thank you all very much.